recording. Thanks, Ram. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 8, Text 18. We're continuing with our reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam. That's where we'll be reading from. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim sarvatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet Shrinvatam swakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana hridyantasto hyavadrani vidunotish surit satam nashta prayesvavadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya Bhagavatyutama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. So again, we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 8, Text 18. Nirnam sadarano dharma savisheshascha yadrisha. That's not the right Shreninam rajarshinam cha. Okay, I'm not doing the right tune and I think you're copying me. Somebody correct me with the tune. Dharma kricheshu jivatam. Okay, let's try it again. Nirnam sadarano dharma. Savisheshascha yadrisha. Shreninam rajarshinam cha. Dharma kritreshu jivatam. Nirnam sadarano dharma. Savisheshascha yadrisha. Shreninam rajarshinam cha. Dharma kritreshu jivatam.
Vinam sadarano dharma. Savisheshascha yadrisha. Shreninam rajarshinam cha. Dharma kritreshu jivatam.
Nirnam sadarano dharma.
Savisheshascha yadrisha.
Shreninam rajarshinam cha. Dharma kritreshu jivatam.
Ninam sadarano dharma. Savisheshascha yadrisha. Shreninam rajarshinam cha. Dharma kritreshu jivatam.
Nirnam sadarano dharma. Avisheshascha yadrisha. Shreninam rajarshinam cha. Dharma kritreshu jivatam.
Would anybody else online like to recite the verse?
Nirnam Sadharanam No Dharma
Vinam Sadharano Dharma
Savishesha Chaya Dirisha
Savisheshashchaya driyasha
Shreninam Raja Jarshinam Chaya
Shreninam rajarsinam cha
Dharma Kricheshveshu Jivatam
Dharma kricheshu jivatam. Okay, we'll move on to the word for word. Nrinam,
Vinam
of human society.
of human society.
Sadharana,
Sadharana,
general.
general,
Dharma,
dharma,
religious affiliation.
religious affiliation,
Savishesha,
savishesha,
specific.
specific,
Cha,
sha,
also.
also,
Yadrisha,
Yadrisha
as they are.
as they are,
Shreninam,
Shreninam,
of the particular three classes.
of the particular three classes,
Rajarshinam,
Rajarsinam,
of the saintly royal order.
of the saintly royal order,
Cha,
Cha,
also.
also,
Dharma,
Dharma,
occupational duty.
occupational duty,
Kri Treshu,
Kritreshu
in the matter of distressed conditions.
in the matter of distressed conditions,
Jivatam,
Jivatam
of the living entities.
of the living entities.
Translation. Please also explain what may generally be the common religious affiliations of human society, as well as their specific occupational duties in religion, the classification of the social orders, as well as the administrative royal orders, and the religious principles for one who may be in distress. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. The common religion of all classes of human beings, regardless of whosoever and whatsoever one may be, is devotional service. Even the animals may be included in devotional service to the Lord, and the best example is set by Sri Vrajagaji, or Hanuman, the great devotee of Lord Sri Rama. As we have already discussed, even the aborigines and cannibals can also be engaged in devotional service of the Lord if they happen to be under the guidance of a genuine devotee of the Lord. In the Skanda Purana, there is a narration of a hunter in the jungle. There's a narration that a hunter in the jungle became the most enlightened devotee of the Lord by the guidance of Sri Narada Muni. Therefore, devotional service to the Lord can be equally shared by every living being. Religious affiliation in terms of different countries and cultural circumstances is obviously not the common religion of the human being. Rather, the basic principle is devotional service. Even if a particular type of religious principle does not recognize the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the followers still have to obey the disciplinary principles laid down by a particular leader. Such a leader of a religious sect is never the supreme leader, because such a circumstantial leader comes to the position of leadership after undergoing some penance. The Supreme Personality of Godhead does not, however, require to be under disciplinary action to become leader, as we see in the activities of Lord Krishna. The occupational duties of the castes and the orders of society following the principles of livelihood also depend on the principle of devotional service. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that a person can achieve the highest perfection of life simply by awarding the results of his occupational duty unto the devotional service of the Lord. People following the principles of devotional service to the Lord can never be put into difficulty, and thus there cannot be any question of apad dharma, or religion in distress. As will be explained in this book by the greatest authority, Srila Shukadeva Goswami, there is no religion save and except the devotional service of the Lord, though this may be presented in different forms. Jai. Yes, so the chapter is titled Questions by King Parikshit. And so there's this theme that all living beings are asking questions we're primarily asking questions about food and shelter and water and mates and things like this. And this entire chapter is dedicated to the kinds of questions that we're really meant to be asking, inquiring about the science of God, inquiring about the science of the material creation of God. And here Maharaj Parikshit is asking all kinds of very philosophical questions, such as how should we be behaving as human beings. And there, in the first sentence of the purport, the common religion of all classes of human beings, regardless of whosoever or whatsoever one may be, is devotional service. This refers to Sanatana Dharma. So this is the eternal constitutional position of all beings, and especially so of human beings, where Sanatana means that which has no beginning and no end, and Dharma is that which can't be separated from a thing, like the liquidity of water or the fire of heat. And in the same way, devotional service can't be separated from any living entity, including the aborigines, the cannibals, even animals, or a hunter of animals. In the end, we can't extricate ourselves from devotional service. And I like some of the examples here. I found some pastimes, like maybe we know about Hanuman. He was always by Lord Ramachandra's side when he went to go fight Ravana. He helped Ram build the bridge across the water of floating stones, and he was also on Arjuna's chariot. So he's really quite an exalted devotee. Even actually Lord Chaitanya. There's a pastime of Lord Chaitanya paying his obeisances to Lord Hanuman, because he's such a great devotee. Yes, and Prabhupada also mentions aborigines and cannibals, and so this is also another pastime that I like, of an aborigine woman. She was selling fruit, and Krishna at the time, my understanding is he was a child. He wanted some fruit, so he grabbed some handfuls of grain, and he came to the aborigine woman. But by the time he got there, he hardly had anything in his hands. But the woman still wanted to give Krishna fruit, so she let Krishna have as much as he wanted. And because it was such an act of love, right? I don't know the verse in the Bhagavad Gita, but Krishna says, "Offer me with love and devotion, what is it? A leaf, a fruit, some water." I think there's one other item that Krishna mentions, and because this was an act of love, it was an act of devotional service by this aborigine woman. Krishna filled then her baskets with jewels and with gold, because this is how we're meant to be relating to Krishna, is out of love. It's like the aborigine woman wasn't giving Krishna the fruit to get like the 6 or 7 grains of rice that were remaining in Krishna's hand, but because she had so much spontaneous love and affection for him. And Prabhupada writes, "From this incident, one should learn that for anything offered to Krishna with love and affection, Krishna can reciprocate many millions of times over, both materially and spiritually." And then the basic principle involved is an exchange of love. So I really like that pastime. And so same thing I mentioned, how even animals. I think Hanuman, if we consider Hanuman an animal, he's quite an advanced animal, certainly more advanced than I am, but still Prabhupada is referencing him as an animal, so we can count the animals as well. And then the story that I really want to talk about is the one with the hunter. I really liked reading the story about the hunter. There was this hunter in some forest. There's so many forests and many different names. I don't remember which forest it was, but he was there, and he would half kill animals. Narada Muni, he was on his way back from Vaikuntha, and he was gonna bathe the Ganges, or where the Ganges and some other place connect. And he started finding all these half-killed animals suffering in the forest. There was like a boar and a deer and a rabbit and so many different animals that were half-killed, and they were like squirming and suffering. And so then Narada, being such a compassionate, pure devotee of the Lord, he was aggrieved. He was shocked. He was, I imagine, also furious. Like, who's doing this? What's going on? And so he kept going into the forest, and he found the hunter. He found the hunter that was half killing animals. And so, as Narada Muni was approaching him, he was setting free the animals that were trapped in the hunter's traps. And the hunter was furious, and he wanted to verbally attack Narada, but because he's so wonderful and beautiful and such a devotee of the Lord, the hunter actually couldn't verbally attack him. So he was in a way forced to approach him in a more friendly manner, and he approached him something like, "My dear sir, why are you setting my animals free?" Where really we can imagine what other kinds of things he wanted to say. and so Narada Muni, he began to explain to him that he was sorry to have frustrated him, but he really didn't like to see so much suffering happening, and he asked the hunter if he knew who was half killing these animals. And the hunter told him, yeah, it's me. This is how I've learned from my father since childhood, that this is kind of what you do, and it's very pleasurable. I don't know how, like, someone could actually derive pleasure from that, but like, yeah, so that was this hunter's experience. He had learned from his father, this is what you do, so he was continuing to do that. And then Narada Muni began, of course, as a devotee of the Lord, to explain to him some of the science, for example, of karma, of how then he would be really greatly impacted. To kill an animal is already such a sinful activity, but then to half kill an animal, this is so many times greater, because then the amount of suffering that one is creating is so much greater, and so then the sinful reaction, the karma, is likewise so much greater. And so something about Narada explaining this softened the heart of the hunter, and he actually began to understand, oh man, I'm gonna be in some serious trouble, because like I've been doing this for so long. And so he began to beg to Narada Muni, please, sir, please help me. What can I do to counteract everything that I've done? Please tell me. And Narada Muni more or less said, I'll tell you only if like you really commit to it. And he said, sure, whatever you say, I'll follow it no matter what. So he instructed him to break his bow, and then gave him many other instructions. You go back home and you get rid of everything you accumulated. You build a hut. And then I'll send foodstuffs your way. You won't ever have to hunt to maintain yourself or your wife. You just take only what you need for you and your wife, and then of course you chant the Maha Mantra. So the hunter said, yeah, sure. And so he went and did just that, and he found, because so anytime that somebody visits a devotee, it's customary to bring food, and so the news had spread that Narada Muni was able to make a devotee of this hunter, who I guess he also had a reputation for how much horrid half-killing he would do. And so people were naturally curious to come visit him, and so they did. They would constantly come to visit this new devotee and then bring so much food, and so then the hunter was taken care of in this way. And then I don't know how much later it was, but Narada Muni and his friend, some other sage, I don't remember his name, they went to go visit him, and so the hunter was seeing his spiritual master Narada Muni coming, and so naturally he wanted to pay obeisances, but he realized that there was ants on the floor, and so I don't know how long it took him, but he was moving all the ants away because he didn't want to hurt a single ant. And then that's when Narada, or maybe it was the friend I remember, mentioned how wonderful it is that even a hunter that was purposely half killing all these animals, now was taking the time. He was so cautious, he didn't want to even inflict pain on an ant. And that then this is the wonder, this is the power, this is the potency of the pure devotee of the Lord, of Narada Muni. I don't know, Narada Muni is often called maybe one of the greatest devotees. Now here also the hunter's called one of the most enlightened devotees of the Lord. I think kind of like that's just there to say like they're so amazing. Maybe like they're all on the same platform, like the pure devotees. But nevertheless, I found it such a beautiful story that even a hunter, which is considered amongst the lowest of the low for killing animals, and especially this hunter, half killing, became such a compassionate being towards all other creatures. So I really like this story because for me the suffering of animals is something that's like particularly painful for me. Like right now in our world, there's the cultural diversity topics and treating different groups with consideration and how to balance the fact that certain groups have been oppressed for so long, people of color, and women, etc. There's so many of these topics in society. And then for me, I see animals as also falling in this category, and also that they've been suffering for so long. Like never that there's been any kind of human rights movement, like never has it really impacted animals. They've been oppressed and tortured and suffering all along. So I have a lot of compassion. So I really liked this story here. Yes, and so to get into some more of the more scientific, not in the modern scientific sense, but in the sense of religious science, of social science, King Maharaj, he's asking about the social orders and the occupational duties. Right. So according to religious life, we have 4 social divisions and 4 spiritual divisions. We have the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, and in the spiritual order, we have the Brahmachari, the Grihastra, Vanaprast, and Sannyas. And this is the Varnashram science of religious life, of spiritual life, of making gradual progress. In a lecture from Prabhupada, he mentioned that we're meant to clean our hearts gradually, that we're not meant to do it abruptly. And I didn't read too much into his explanation after that, but I found that really interesting. That this is in a way the way that it's meant to be, at least for most of us, that it's meant to be gradual, and that's what this what the science, what this these rules and regulations, this established order of social order, spiritual order is meant to do. Is meant to support us to be able to progress progressively, gradually, rather than like the hunter who went from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high. And I don't know what the time span was, but it didn't sound like it was that long. So yes, inquiring about the social order, the administrative royal orders, and their duties. So a Brahmin, he has 6 Brahminical engagements. A Brahmin must be conversant with the Vedic scriptures, and also he must be able to teach it to others. He must be expert in worshipping the different deities and performing the different sacrifices, the different ceremonies, rituals, yagya. And he must also be able to perform these for the other classes who possibly won't be able to, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, the Sudras. A Brahmin can accept all kinds of contributions, and then after taking only what he needs, then he gives the rest in charity. And Brahmins are only in the mode of goodness. They're purely in the mode of goodness. And then we have the Kshatriyas, the administrative class. They fight, they protect, they're allowed to be violent. And a Kshatriya shouldn't accept charity, because they already can have so much given their administrative role, so that they shouldn't accept charity. But they can perform the other 5 duties mentioned for the Brahmins. A king or Kshatriya is not allowed to levy taxes on Brahmins, but he can make his livelihood by levying minimal taxes, etc., upon everybody else. So that's why then they're not meant to accept charity, because in a way they already have like enforced charity given to them. And Kshatriyas should be well acquainted with the worship of demigods. So they're in the mode of passion. they're mostly, if not entirely, in the mode of passion, kshatriyas. And then we have the Vaishyas, the business class. So the mercantile community should follow the directions of the Brahmins. They're always taking direction from the Brahmins, and engaging in such activities as agriculture, as trade, as different different practices, different business practices, and protection of the cows. So I like this one. Maybe by this definition I can identify with being a Vaishya. Not to say that I'm actually a Vaishya, but as far as the values, protection of cows. And the Vaishyas are also devoted to the demigods. Perhaps they're less well versed than the Kshatriyas, but they're devoted to the demigods, the spiritual master, and of course to Krishna, to advancing religious principles, economic development, and sense gratification, dharma, artha, and kama. And they're always following the word of the spiritual master. So this also includes what to do with all the money and all the economic development that they're doing. And so then they're in mixed. They're partially in the mode of passion, partially in the mode of ignorance. And then we have the Shudras. This is the laborer class. They're considered to be primarily or entirely in the mode of ignorance. And I found a couple of descriptions of what their duties are. So the Shudra, the only duty is to accept a master from any of the three higher classes, and then to engage in their service. And then a little bit more specifically, they are to offer their obeisances to anybody from any of the three higher classes. They're meant to be very clean, free from duplicity, serving one's master, performing sacrifices without uttering mantras, not stealing, speaking in truth, and also giving all protections to cows and Brahmins. These are also, here they're described as the symptoms. I don't know if this is also the duties, but these are the symptoms of Shudras. So this is these are the material duties of each of the four classes, because then regardless of what class, we all share one occupational duty, and that's devotional service. So what we mentioned at the beginning, Sanatana Dharma, that whomsoever or whatsoever one may be, one's religion and then duty is devotional service. And the same thing for the spiritual classes. Their respective duties were like nuanced and kind of complicated, so I didn't detail those in detail. I'm just clumping them all together and saying, well, at any step of the way, whether brahmachari or grihastha or vanapras or sannyas, it's devotional service, and the devotional service might look different for persons in each of those stages, though ultimately the category for all of them is devotional service. There's the 9 processes of devotional service described, headed by Shravana Kirtanam. So we can say this is the occupational duty of anybody in any of the different spiritual positions. Yes. So continuing with the purport, towards the end, people following the principles of devotional service to the Lord can never be put into difficulty, and thus there cannot be any question of apadharma or religion in distress. So I found 2 seemingly conflicting answers, as practically everything always seems seemingly conflicting to me in Krishna consciousness. So I've just learned, even though I think it's conflicting, I just say seemingly conflicting, because I know that somehow there's a way that it makes sense. So 2 answers for this apadharma. Apadharma is the duties, the spiritual, the religious duties of one in times of distress. So there's 2 answers. There's answers for how one should behave in times of distress, and then there's the answer giving in the purport here, that if one follows devotional service, then there actually is no distress. So I'll touch on both. because again, the rules of apadharma, they also seemed very complicated to me. Just to give a couple of examples of what I found in the Bhagavad Gita, or not the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam. Except in a time of emergency, lower persons should not accept the occupational duties of those who are higher. When there is an emergency, of course, everyone but the kshatriya may accept the means of livelihood of others. In times of emergency, one may accept any of the various types of professions known as Rita, Amrita, Mrita, Pramrita, and Satyanrita. But one should not at any time accept the profession of a dog. So for me, it was like, okay, it was like very nuanced and like what all this meant. Like you can you can pick the grain in a field with asking or without asking, or a field that was tilled or not tilled, or like there's like all these nuances that I didn't care to like remember or write down to describe. Because for me, what I think the primary point of the purport actually is that if one is sincerely, wholeheartedly devoted to devotional service, then one would never be practicing religion in distress, because one would never feel in distress. A pure devotee is equanimous to happiness and distress. And so, at least this is my understanding of what Prabhupada is hinting at in the purport here. But as far as distress goes, something also that I found that seemingly contradicting to what I just said, but it's not. It all kind of has its place somewhere somehow. It's in the sixth canto of the Bhagavatam. And in part of the purport, Prabhupada writes, one generally follows different types of religious principles or performs various occupational duties according to the body given to him by the modes of material nature. In this verse, however, real religious principles are explained. So kind of like how I hear that, I don't think that this is what Prabhupada is saying, kind of those rules and regulations for your psychophysical nature, for your social position, those are kind of like less important to what Prabhupada is going to say here, the real religious principles. And what immediately follows is, everyone should be unhappy to see others in distress, and happy to see others happy. Atmavat sarva bhuteshu. One should feel the happiness and distress of others as their own. So this is speaking about compassion, right? Like Narada Muni in the forest, he was having so much compassion for these animals that were suffering. He was feeling their pain as his own. And so this is what Prabhupada writes, is real spiritual principles, is not so much necessarily what we're doing materially, that has its place and that's important too, but what are we doing that's not material, right? What are the qualities of our heart? What are the religious principles that we're following? Non-violence, we can consider compassion, as is mentioned here. Everyone should be unhappy to see others in distress and happy to see others happy. So one way that we can think about it is the questions, the religious principles for one who may be in distress. So we can consider not necessarily that we're the ones in distress, but what are the religious principles when we're seeing others in distress? And that's to feel their distress as our own. I know for me, I'm usually more motivated to do something to change my own distress than when I think of the distress of others, especially if they're if they're not close to me. Right? We can talk about concentrated self-centeredness and expanded self-centeredness. So yeah, I know that this applies to me for sure. If it's my own distress, generally, not always, I also have my way to stew in my own distress, but okay, if it's like acute distress, I'm more motivated to do something about it, and if it's families or friends, I'm also motivated to do about it. And if it's like, if I read in the news about the suffering of people in a different continent or country or state even, or even city, then like I'm significantly less motivated to do something about it. Now, if I were to follow this spiritual principle and to feel their distress as my own, then I imagine I would never stop behaving in ways to minimize, to diminish, to liberate others from the stress, because there's so much suffering, so much distress in the world. So that's for me what this points to is really an ongoing pursuit to treat others as we would ourselves, like the golden rule, right? Treat others how you want to be treated, or like Jesus Christ would say, love thy neighbor. And I don't know if he exactly said love thy neighbor as you love yourself, but this is how I understand it. Is yes, if we have this Atmavad Sarvabhuteshu, if we're feeling others' happiness and distresses others, then naturally we want to make others happy. Right? We want to liberate others from distress, and we want to make them happy because it's also our happiness and distress. Now, in a way, yeah, the devotee is equanimous to happiness and distress for themselves, and they want to help others to not be in distress and to be happy. It's in a way how a devotee is meant to be tolerant of all kinds of offenses to themselves, but they won't tolerate offenses to other devotees, or especially to the Lord. Then what I've heard David call transcendental anger comes out to do something about it. Right. So I'll finish before going on to questions with a sweet pastime that talks about Hanuman, because I really like to hear about the pastimes. So this is speaking of Lord Chaitanya. He was with many of his devotees' friends, and it was a period of his life where he was experiencing festival celebrations nearly every day, or maybe it was every day. And on the victory day, celebrating the conquest of Lanka, a day known as Vijaya Dashami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he dressed up all his devotees' friends like monkey soldiers, and he was displaying the emotions of Hanuman. He took up a large tree branch, and mounting the walls of the Lanka fort, he began to dismantle it. He began to wave this tree branch around, and in the ecstasy of Hanuman, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he angrily said, "Where's the rascal Ravana? He has kidnapped the universal mother Sita. Now I shall kill him and all his family." And everyone watching was astonished. They were in awe to watch the transcendental ecstasy of Lord Chaitanya embodying the transcendental ecstasy of Hanuman. So I always find these pastimes so sweet. The pastimes of one personality of Krishna interacting with another personality, or with the personality of a devotee, or maybe even pretending or role playing another personality. I always find it so sweet, so relishable to hear these pastimes. So all glories to Lord Chaitanya, all glories to Hanuman, to Lord Ramachandra, and to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. I open it up to questions, comments, discussions, elaborations, etc., etc. Ramachandra.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thanks. It's okay if I stay here?
As long as you speak loud enough so everyone can hear.
Yeah, you could also.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I appreciated all the parallel devotional universe that you brought to our consciousness. And yeah, it's something that I find very fascinating, how, like, speaking in the realm of religion, spirituality, there's so many conflicts, and Krishna consciousness sort of stands out in the conflict resolution between all of that, in the sense that it brings the relationships. Like within Krishna consciousness, like you go to India and there are like so many religions there, so many paths and so many traditions. And then Lord Chaitanya jumps in and he travels all around India and exhibits all these pastimes and connects everything in this philosophy, this oneness and difference. And what is that oneness and difference from me? It's relationships. Relationships are uniquely individual and indivisible. And I guess my question is, what's your favorite pastime from the ones you brought to us?
Okay. Thank you. I before I answer, I'll say I really like how you made the connection with Chinta Veda Tattva, the oneness and difference about relationships. I hadn't thought of it this way. I like to hear that. So, well, I kind of have two answers. Like the last one that I read was really sweet to me. Just like I think that it's so like funny and adorable and cute to think of like Lord Chaitanya dressing up as a monkey, dressing up his friends as monkeys, and role playing Hanuman, the battle with Ravana. I think that that's really sweet. But the one that maybe was the most profound for me was the one about the hunter. Like that one I read about extensively, and that one was. I mean, I guess it's kind of hard to pick. Like they're all relishable. Yeah. So it's kind of like you said. They have their distinct relishable feelings.
Do you thought about bringing the hunter because of the cannibal? Because Prabhupada said cannibal there in the purport?
No, he also mentions hunter in the purport. So he mentions in the Skanda Purana there's a narration of a hunter in the jungle that became the most enlightened devotee by the guidance of Narada Muni. So he speaks about that specific pastime, and so then since he mentioned that specific pastime, then I looked into that one more.
So where from is the cannibal? Is it like from Mahabharata or something?
Cannibal. There's the Bhima pastime. I think Prabhupada there is referring to the Kirata Hunanda Pulinda Pukasha verse. Yane Chapapa Yada Pashraya Shriya. And even lower rate, because actually that verse talks about it talks about Turks and Greeks and Europeans and even others. So I think Prabhupada's referring to that verse there. That by serving the pure devotee, they become the most exalted members of the world.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that in, dear, because I tried to find an example of the cannibals also. I was curious, but I didn't, at least in the research that I did, I wasn't able to find anything, so I'm glad that you mentioned that.
It's just a category of people that always exist, like the conversation we had about Darwin the other day.
Yes.
Cannibals are, community of people that always exist, and that it's kind of flow. It's more than eating animal flesh. It's also eating human flesh. Yeah. So it's kind of flow on a totem pole. And even the cannibals who are acting in that way, they can be saved by the mercy of pure devotees.
Yeah. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
There's cannibals now on Earth.
Yeah, I found a lecture by Prabhupada saying, yeah, I've heard that there's cannibals here and there.
Yeah, there's cannibals.
Yeah.
Well, related to the Ramachandra pastime, because Ravana was very Vedic, but he's of the tribe called Rakshasa, which are known as cannibals. And so, and like one of Ravana's brothers is Vibhishan, so of a Rakshasa tribe, cannibal tribe, and Vibhishan's a great devotee of Ram. So that could also be an example.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
I see a chat.
Yeah, I'm seeing there's some comments. There are cannibals in Papua New Guinea.
Yes.
Someone said. Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm going to type it out.
I'll just mute.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, there's no echo. This conversation makes me think, well, we should all become pure devotees and then engage people in our service. That's all.
That's the point.
Yeah, quite an aspiration, I think.
And we don't need to be waiting to be pure devotees. We can accept service from others on behalf of the pure devotees, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada give an example of like when we serve the pure devotee and connect with the pure devotees, then there is no difference between us and the pure devotee. And he give an analogy of if you have a car, like driving 60 miles an hour, and then you have a bicycle, and the bicycle, I don't know how much, like 5-6 miles an hour, And then the bicycle cannot go faster than that. That's the limitation of the bicycle. However, if the driver of the bicycle hold on to a car, then right away the bicycle goes 60 miles an hour. Even so, it's not the capacity of the bicycle or the driver of the bicycle. So similarly, when we connect with Srila Prabhupada, we connect with the pure devotee, then regardless of our qualification, then in a sense we become equal to the pure devotee. Not that we are thinking we are equal, but the tendency can be there. And then from that place we are encouraged to engage people in service.
That's wonderful. I really like that you have a comment. I really like that analogy.
If I take the analogy literally, it sounds dangerous. And if I jump out of the literal analogy, it's also, I guess, dangerous. But yeah, that's the method of purification we take to our responsibility.
Method of purification become like about me.
Yeah.
But that's not what I'm saying. That's true too. But like being an instrument, seeing ourselves, well, I'm not pure, I'm not advanced, I'm not qualified. Krishna, Prabhupada, Krishna's representative, Prabhupada is pure, is advanced, is qualified. And then I stay in that place of not, like I'm a bicycle. And then from that place of not, then I can engage people in service of Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah.
Now wait a minute, because we always talk about I'm not the vehicle, but now you're saying you're a bicycle and Prabhupada's a car. I really appreciate that analogy. Like immediately I find it like, well, I can imagine. Like I instantly find it like liberating or like empowering. It's like, well, I don't have, like, how could I share something with it? Think, okay, I'm just like handing you like this thing, like I'm just like the mailman. So I really appreciate. I think maybe Prabhupada gives a similar analogy also with the mailman. So it reminds me of that. I really appreciate that analogy. Thank you. Any other comments, questions, reactions?
I appreciate very much what you shared about animals. Yes, that's really like a issue that touches your heart, and that so many humanitarian movements, rights movements, thisism, thatism, but often they don't include animals. So I had my graduate degrees were actually in the School of Social Work, and so the profession of social work, maybe more than any other profession, are real champions for all these movements, against racism, sexism, nationalism, like that. So I had the same thoughts as you back in the 90s, like, okay, social work, and like that. And so I did a literature search. I went on all the info bases about, okay, so the social work profession and social workers related to animals, and there was nothing. There was nothing there. And so I took that. I said, well, this is Super Soul and Prabhupada want me to do something here. So I wrote and I published an article. It was actually published in the top journal in social work called Social Work. It was in the January 2000 issue, and it's entitled Social Work and Speciesism. And I write a lot about, like, there really seems to be a gap in the literature here. And and then for like a year afterwards, the journal was getting a lot of letters to the editor about my article. Some supportive, and some were threatened by it and opposed to that social workers should care about this at all.
Wow. They were opposed to it, huh?
Some, definitely, and
Thank you. Yeah, I can. I'm moved to hear like I've heard you share that story again or in the past, and something about like this time when I heard you say, Super Soul and Prabhupada want me to do something, like connected with Malini's comment, where I like normally don't even like offer space for like, well, why would they want me to do anything, and now with Malini's comment and like your comment, I can see how like, oh yeah, I can see easily how then there could be a possibility for me to do something there as well. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, reactions? Yes, Leonard?
Yes.
Oh,
Oh,
there's
there's some strange feedback.
when I speak. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, cool. So it would be remiss of me if I did not mention that in relationship to this story about the hunter and Narada Muni, so two devotees in our community have written a book about this pastime and illustrated it. So I'm going to share it with the group. So yeah, it's called The Peaceable Forest. And the text was written by Kosha, Badahari's wife, Kosha Eli, and it was illustrated by my wife, Annapurna. So check it out. It's published by Mandala, and you can support Kosha by purchasing this. Not that you need to purchase it, but it's just that this story has inspired a lot of people, and so Kosha and my wife put this together. It was published a couple of years ago. It's called The Peaceable Forest, India's Tale of Kindness to Animals. So I just wanted to share that with everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, my kids love that book. We have that book. It's great. They give a great review. It's a very nice book for children. Very Krishna.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that, Leonard. I'm planning to get the book. Any more questions before we close for today, or comments, sharings? If not, I'll end with saying in connection to the mailman, the car and bicycle analogy, and somebody can correct me if I didn't get it right, but I've heard Prabhupada say something along the lines of by sharing the Mahamantra with others, since we've gotten it from Prabhupada, it's as good as them getting it from Prabhupada himself. So they're getting the pure, bona fide, full potency mantra, even if we're not ourselves pure devotees.
Yeah, and I think you're referring. There's a letter Prabhupada writes to someone named Andrea Temple somewhere in the Caribbean, the Bahamas. I'm not sure if it's a male or female, and like early, like 68, 69, and he writes to her, yeah, that by hearing the Hare Krishna Mahamantra from my disciples, my representatives, you're receiving it directly from me.
Yeah. Jai. So we'll close with that. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Wonderful class. Ki jai.
Joy.